On today's episode, we talk to Nick Clark Windo, the author of The Feed, a post-apocalyptic thriller that is being turned into a $40 million TV series. We talk about how Nick overcame the lows of having to give up his dream career and the journey of ups and downs that has brought him to this point now. This interview will blow your mind and challenge you to question whether you're really pursuing your true desires in life. I loved talking to Nick. It was amazing to hear his story, and I left feeling really inspired and positive. I hope it has the same effect for you. Enjoy. So welcome to the show, Nick. Thanks very much for doing this.
Absolute pleasure. Lovely to be here. Thank you for having me.
So, The Feed, your book. I started reading that over the weekend, and I've got to say, it's blowing me away so far. Incredible read, very sort of the moment as well. Probably the best thing, I guess, is for you just to tell us what the main kind of idea, the story behind it is, without giving too much away, obviously. And then we'll get stuck into the process of writing it, etc.
Well, I mean, thank you very much for reading the book in the first place. Obviously, I strongly recommend that anyone listening does the same. Preferably having bought it. I don't know if you bought your copy.
I did buy it. I've got it on Kindle. So I'm not listening to it on Audible either. You know, I've got a friend who says he reads books, but actually he just listens to them. And I feel like that's not really truthful.
That sort of counts.
Yeah.
You'd get to hear my voice on the audiobook if you did.
So maybe you should buy that.
Well, however you want. Yeah. But the feed. So the feed is an implant in people's brains. Like the iPhone. You may have noticed the iPhone got very successful very quickly, and the feed does too. It's the internet at the speed of thought. So you and I are here chatting, and I'm also talking to my wife, I'm talking to my mum, I just downloaded a film, I just learnt Chinese.
Yeah.
And everyone gets very used to it and dependent on it.
Right.
Which obviously doesn't make great drama. So pretty rapidly in the book, I hope this isn't a spoiler, the feed goes down.
Right. That's not a spoiler because it happens in the first chapter.
Yeah, page 15, the feed goes down.
Yeah.
You'll never see it coming. And the book is then looking at, how people survive without it, what actually happens to us as humans when a vital piece of technology is taken away. And in that world, it's about two parents and their search for their abducted child.
I've got to say, I think the thing that makes it so compelling to read, at least for me in the early stages of the book, which I'm still in, is that it doesn't feel like it's too far away from reality, right? Obviously, it is a step forward in terms of technology to have something implanted in your brain in that sense. But it really feels kind of like I can recognize that world. And I guess in part that's probably part of the success, the reason it's a successful book.
Yeah, well, and I think it came from the fact that I wanted to look at what was happening to me.
Right.
I mean, I know it's set a little bit in the future with a technology that doesn't exist yet, but everything that I was looking at was coming from my experience predominantly with Twitter.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I had, years and years ago, I had a bit of insomnia that I'd never had before, and it was horrible. And after a long time, I realized that what was causing it was Twitter.
Really?
And I love Twitter, so, I'm not saying anything against it, but everything in its right time and place. And I had a dream one night when I actually was asleep, and it was the whole night, and I woke up in the morning, and I had been seeing my dreams through a Twitter feed, really? And this big thumb had come down and swiped down, refreshing my dream feed every 30 seconds or so, and it was so exhausting. And it was that moment, that morning I woke up, I realised, oh yeah, you've been checking Twitter up until the moment before you go to sleep.
Okay.
So a lot of things coalesced in the book then. One, the title, The Feed, came that morning. Two was actually wanting to understand what technology is doing to us as humans. And for me, it was just making my thoughts race. And I wanted to explore that in the book. How is technology affecting us? And it seemed to me a good way of doing that is looking at what happened when people lost that technology. That's when you can actually feel the reverberations, the echoes of what we're, I think, largely inured to and very unaware of at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, that's really interesting. And again, I don't think this is a spoiler because it's so early in the book, but that complete reliance on the feed to do everything, even reading people's emotions.
Yeah, it was great.
Simple as that.
It's brilliant. How was your day today, love? Oh, here you go.
Yeah.
I've just blobbed out my brain.
Yeah.
What's in the book is called Mundles.
Right.
So it's a memory bundle of everything that happened to you that day. It's not
Yeah.
just the events, it's your emotions, it's your perception of reality, and someone has just absorbed it completely.
Yeah,
So,
and that's really interesting because you have characters who were born before the feed was a thing, so they have those skills of being able to read or do any kind of things that we consider normal.
Yeah.
And then those who are born afterwards, it's called in utero, right?
Yeah.
Who,
so these people had the feed in utero, it was implanted, so they always had the feed.
Yeah.
And they obviously suffer pretty hard when the feed goes down because the feed stores your memories, so the muscle of the brain can't really form memories that well.
Right.
They can't speak properly.
Yeah.
Because that's what the feed did, and vocabulary was stored there. And then you also have this new generation of kids who've grown up after the collapse of the feed. And actually they're brilliant because they know all of those, the body language stuff and all of that stuff instinctively. So they're actually very wise in a world that has lost its tool.
This is very interesting. It makes me think, I don't know if this is even part of your thinking, if you'd ever heard this, but I read this somewhere that taxi drivers who do the knowledge, which for any non-English listeners, that is kind of a process that taxi drivers in London have to go through to learn all the streets in London and the best way of getting to each one from wherever they are in the city. But apparently a certain part of taxi drivers who've done the knowledge, their brains actually grows.
That's right. I
larger.
think it's the hippocampus.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Which is to do with your geographical awareness.
Okay.
And I think it's just, it's not, he's about to say, it's just like a muscle. I've got no idea how the brain works. But it seems to me that a muscle is a nice analogy.
Yeah.
The more you use a bit, the bigger it grows. Equally, the less you lose it, the more it withers. There's a great book actually called The Shallows. That if anyone wants to have a look at all of this stuff, it's absolutely fascinating how technology is affecting the physical makeup of our brains. And it looks at technology through the ages. So what happened when the printing press came in? What happened when radio and TV started? And what's happening now, I think, is at such an extreme because it's the way we think. It's not just the way we're communicating with people, it's affecting the way we think to ourselves.
Yeah.
And that is something that it's very hard to be precise about how it's affecting us. It's like goldfish. They don't see the water they're swimming through, and this stuff is the water we're swimming through.
I mean, this is actually a fascinating... You hear this from people who say that when the printing press came out, whenever that was it, I don't know, 1500s or something, let's say. And people were saying, well, people are going to stop communicating because they're not going to be sitting down telling each other stories, And
I think Aristotle said that about writing.
Really?
It's
okay.
like, guys, this is a seriously bad idea.
Yeah. So, but it does feel like it's slightly more...
It feels more profound at the moment. And I think, just in terms of the theme of this podcast, failure, success, it feels to me, and the book is dark. It does go to some dark places about how this technology has failed us, or rather how we use the technology fails us as a society. Because technology is inert. It doesn't do anything without us.
Right.
It's all about how we're using it.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I would like to think that, without giving any spoilers at the end of the book and throughout, there is hope. Because you learn from failures, don't you? And out of that failure grows some different form of success with wisdom that you wouldn't have had otherwise. So I hope as a society we get there. What scares me is that the way technology is completely embedded in our societies now is that in terms of a failure, in terms of this stuff going wrong, it's going to look pretty catastrophic.
Yeah. And you know, again, to touch on kind of that failure success, and I'm not far enough into the book to have really learnt too much about the father who invents the feed and what his motivations are. But, you know, coming from the tech startup world myself, there is kind of a lot of talk about people pursuing success, typically in a monetary sense, at all costs, without thinking about the societal impacts.
And I think there is a big difference in the way different people can define what's good for humanity or what progress means. I think you're going to find the rest of the book interesting. But obviously I'd say that. Keep reading. But that's there. It's there. It's at the heart of, I think, where we are as a society. I mean, looking back at ancient Greece, you know, they had plays that were, there was a social obligation to go to them and then debate what was on stage. And those debates then shaped law and the way people had to behave within that society.
Wow.
Now we've reached a global society which has a whole load of different laws around the place, yet we've got this thing, the internet, which actually spans the entire world and seems to be out of the law to a greater or lesser extent. And also the development of things like AI. You know, the British government has said actually they don't want to put in any regulations around it. Wow.
Yeah.
This is something that's going to profoundly affect the way we go, and there's no national or international debate about regulations. You know, Elon Musk, I do feel somewhere down the line I should have tried to sue him for some sort of breach in IP, obviously, because he's doing this neural lace, which is so lifted from the feed. I don't know how he got an early draft of the book. But that stuff's incredible, and it might be progress. It might be the way we have to go.
Yeah.
Because that seems to be what humans do. We push the realm of what's possible by trying, by failing, by trying again, by succeeding. But then succeeding just means you push more. But is that the right thing to do?
Right.
I don't know.
It's very exciting, but there's a real sort of sense of foreboding, and I don't really know how to explain it. That's why you're the author, I'm not, because I can't put it into words. But yeah,
it's definitely started some interesting debates.
Yeah. And it is so of the moment, right? Like you're saying about Elon Musk. So yeah, fascinating book. And obviously I'm not the only one who thinks that, because it is, and you'll know a bit more about this. I've just picked this up from the newspapers, but it's being turned into a $40 million TV show. Is it by Amazon and for Virgin Media in the UK?
It's a big co-production between Amazon and all three media and Liberty Global.
Right.
So it is currently shooting right now as we speak.
Unbelievable. And some pretty big actors in it. Yep. David Thewlis? I never know how to...
David Thewlis, yeah. Actually, he's playing the father figure that you mentioned.
Yeah.
And I was at a read-through for the next 2 episodes, which have just started shooting last week. And what you're talking about, that debate about technology, that almost ambivalence, is it good, is it bad, what's it doing, that was very much at the heart of his character. It's fantastic. He's looking great.
Okay.
Yeah.
Excellent. And he, you know, people will know him obviously from Harry Potter.
Yep.
But I actually know him probably most from The Big Lebowski.
Big Lebowski,
yeah,
Fargo Series 3. If you haven't watched that, get into that.
I haven't seen that, but I understand he's amazing in that.
Fantastic.
Yeah, so, I mean, that just, wow, what a kind of endorsement of your book to get that, you know, someone makes it into a massive TV show.
Yeah, it's absolutely amazing. It's remarkable, and... incredibly lucky what you were talking about, the book tapping into zeitgeisty stuff. That's not the sort of thing that you can predict.
No.
I think as a writer or any form of creative person, I guess, you've got your radar up, haven't you? You've got your famously thin, sensitive skin, and it's about noticing what is agitating it.
Yeah. And
then hoping against all odds that if it's agitating you, it's agitating other people.
Right.
And that if something is getting you thinking, then other people are also thinking in the same way. And then you've just got to hope that you get there first or early enough, or do it in a way that is substantially different from other people, for someone out there to go, oh, look, this is the thing we want to use to explore this. And that, I think, is an incredibly lucky process. I'm sitting on the other side of a whole load of luck.
Right. But I mean, that's very modest of you. But you know, I think what you say there about just sort of trusting in your instincts as to what excites you, that's something really important, I think.
And let's be clear, like sometimes those instincts work and sometimes they don't.
Sure.
So the Feed is my first book that's been published, but it's not the first one I've written.
Right.
So there's some other instincts which are languishing in a drawer.
Yeah, but do you think and do you think that's something you learn in life? I think I'm thinking about my own experience when I was younger. I probably, in my career with tech startups, I was probably trying to make something that I thought people would want to use.
Yeah.
When really I should have been focusing on what's a problem that I experience that I can fix. And you know, in the same sense, the podcast, right?
Yeah.
This is just something I've started because it fascinates me, this whole topic.
Yeah.
And I'm just thinking, well, if it fascinates me, it probably fascinates other people.
Yeah.
And you know, who knows how many other people, but it will fascinate someone else.
Yeah.
And trusting your instincts, doing something that you're interested in and passionate about, I think is the only way to go. I
think so. I think it also affords you some protection, because failure hurts, rejection hurts. If you have been focusing your attention and your passion in something that you really care about, if you can hold your head up and say, I still believe in it, I still think that's interesting, it still fascinates me. Actually, the open inverted commas success of it, i.e. how many people have bought it, how many people have read it, how many people have taken part in it, doesn't matter.
Yeah.
To a degree, if you can say that you still find it fascinating.
And that's kind of another example of making clear to yourself what is the idea of success, right?
Yeah.
Because if you write it and you're just enjoying the experience,
yeah,
and that's the success in itself, because you spend a lot of time, you do something that you're proud of, and you know it doesn't turn into a $40 million TV series.
No.
You can still feel very proud of the work you've done.
Absolutely. I mean, I think the definition of what is failure and what is success is incredibly nebulous. And it's something that, well, I don't know, maybe other people do, but I rarely sit down and think to myself, okay, what would success look like here? Or what would failure look like here? And then I can gauge if I'm going to be happy or depressed, off the back of something. Maybe other people approach it differently. I don't, but I think in a way it's essential. Because otherwise you can pin your hopes and your belief on something which has got such a small likelihood of success.
So what? Just to clarify, what do you think is essential? Not viewing it
I think
as a binary thing.
So I think in terms of some mental health, it is important to, failure and success isn't binary.
Yeah.
There is a whole grey area within that are different gradations of something having worked. And I think it's gradations of something having worked as opposed to something having failed in a different way. I try to be optimistic. I try to be positive. So something may not have worked as well as you wanted it to, but it did work, or aspects of it did. And then it's a question of, so these novels, these other novels that I've written that haven't been published, that received a whole host of lovely rejection letters, they were essential to the Feed.
Right.
My writing style in the Feed, or the ideas or the thought process or the way I approached writing, was developed over those books, which as standalone things could be seen as failures. They certainly felt like it. There were certainly pits of unhappiness and depression when you get those rejections back and you've put so much energy into something, you've put so much love into them. And then what you get back is someone else giving their opinion that it wasn't good enough.
Yeah.
But then zoom back out and hopefully those things are part of a process, which is a learning process, which achieves something else.
Yeah. What you're saying makes perfect sense to me. I read a book a few years ago which said exactly what you're saying, which is when you start something, don't view it as either being failure or success. View it as a learning process, right? Yeah. Because if you do make it that binary decision between failure or success, most of the time it's not going to be one or the other. It's going to fall somewhere between those lines. So you're going to be dissatisfied whatever happens, right? So you have to view it as, this is just a process. I'm going to learn a lot from this and, hopefully get to the point which you are now at. Yeah. But even you shouldn't be focused on that. It should just be enjoying the process. But that's difficult to do, right?
Yeah, and I think goals develop. Like if when I, day one, sitting down, writing the feed, if my goal had been to have a TV show adaptation of the book that was being produced by, Amazon and All 3 Media and Liberty Global and all of that, how unlikely is that to happen?
Yeah.
Pretty damn unlikely.
Very unlikely.
And you're going into it with the wrong ambitions.
Yeah.
At the start, I wanted to write this book because I couldn't not. There were ideas, there were themes that scared me. I love writing. I love the process of sitting by myself and wrestling with words. I now love the process of writing a really crap draft.
Really?
As well. Because I'm sort of coming to terms with the fact that you've got to, or I've got to, maybe other people don't, I've got to write a crap draft.
Yeah.
And the next draft is slightly less crap, and so on. And that was what I was focusing on when I was writing the book. Then halfway through that, I thought, actually, I think it's quite good.
Yeah.
So I let a couple of people who I trust read it, and they didn't say it was shit.
That's always a difficult thing to do, right?
No, it's terrifying.
And you have to it has to be someone you know well, so that you can pick up on whether they're genuine when they say they like it as well.
Yeah.
And you have to be able to understand that, because no one who really loves you is going to say it's absolutely terrible.
I think my wife would have done.
Yeah. Okay, so people who are really close to you, like I'm thinking of my family, for instance. Family will always go, yeah, that's pretty shit.
That's something that agents always advise when you're writing them a cover letter. Don't say your mum's read it and loves it, because that's just not something that they're going to use as a genuine gauge of genius.
Yeah, I find that fascinating. Okay, let's go back a little bit. So tell me about the process of how you actually wrote the book. So when did you start writing the book, and how long did it take? And, when did you first send it to an agent?
Yeah. So I first put pen to paper on it at the end of 2012. That was off the back of a lot of thinking.
Right.
Thinking sounds quite active. I do a lot of inactive or accidental thinking as well. I think that's essential. Sort of mulching. You've got ideas in your head that just decompose and attach themselves to other things. I can pinpoint an idea I had when I was about 8 that was definitely part of that mulching process. So pen to paper end of 2012, and that's the start of that drafting process where you don't quite know where it's heading or what it's turning into, or it starts to change. But I had about 2.5-3 years of getting the book to a stage where I thought that it was good enough to send out.
Really? And did you have a lot of kind of false starts when you were doing that in those 2.5 to 3 years? Were there moments where you're going, this is not good enough?
For the feed, I'd thought about it enough. So I knew where it ended. I knew what the last line was going to be. Okay. And actually that was the last line up until draft 20 or so, and over the 5 following drafts. I think it was about 25 drafts in total, but it's still in there. It's just not quite the last line. Uh-huh. But I think that during that process, you've got a sort of magnetic idea, or I did have a magnetic idea of what was going on, in that I was constantly being drawn towards it, or themes, or characters, or you get an idea for a line, or an altercation between 2 characters, and then you're like, okay, well, I've got to get there. At the moment, they like each other, But obviously they've got to be pissed off with each other to say that. So how do I get them there?
Yeah.
And you get lost a little bit, and that's fun, but it takes time.
Yeah, because even as I'm reading it, I'm thinking, this is quite complicated, how you're going to explain how something happened. And because I was reading it knowing that I was going to meet you, and I was thinking, there's obviously something that happens later, which is going to explain all of this. But you've got to structure the whole, because that's clearly been in your mind from the beginning.
Yeah, some of it.
Some of it.
So, I mean, there's a lovely, massive piece of wallpaper that I've got rolled upstairs that when I got to I can't remember, draft 18 or so, when my agent was on board, and she gave me some notes. She's fantastic in many, many ways. One of them is that as an editor, she comes in like an Exocet missile, and something you think you've cunningly hidden, a little plot flaw, where you've failed basically to make it work,
Right.
And boom, there we go. It's just been exploded and revealed, and that's great. That's one of those moments when you want someone to point out failures.
Okay.
Or I do anyway, because I mean, God, please let one person who you trust point it out before a whole load of people read it and start posting about it.
Right.
And so at that point, I got out a big piece of wallpaper and started plotting it properly.
Wow. Okay.
I'm approaching the next book very differently. But that bit of wallpaper, the thing that you're talking about, that pays off in this place.
Right.
There are other things which you will see soon, which are revealed, and then where does that pay off?
Yeah.
I got very structured and analytical about it in a way that my brain naturally isn't analytical.
Okay. Interesting. So, and something you said there kind of makes me want to ask a question. You say that was your 18th draft when the agent was already on board. So what was...
You lose count after a while.
Right. But what's the process? You start writing in 2012. At what point do you go, okay, I'm going to send this out to someone who might be interested and see whether they like it? And what was your confidence level at that point that someone was going to like it?
Yeah. I mean, I wrote the book for myself. I wrote a book I wanted to read.
Yeah.
That was kind of key, I think, to finding this book, not trying to second guess stuff. Actually, I felt old enough and ugly enough, having tried a few other things, to go, do you know what? This is the book I want to read, and if you don't like it, okay, maybe that's something wrong with me, maybe it's something wrong with you, but I'm going to try and write the book I want to read.
Great attitude, I think.
And that process then of drafting and redrafting took a long time, but it's a lovely place to be in because no one's expecting anything from you. During that process, I started to believe in the book and like it and enjoy it, and there are a couple of twists in it that I was like, oh my God, I love this. It gives me tingles when I think of it. So I hope other people respond in the same way. You get a couple of trusted readers reading it, and obviously there are things that don't work, but they're largely positive. So you rewrite it. You rewrite it so it's better. Very often, I don't know, a lovely piece of advice I heard from Neil Gaiman. Not personally, I'd love to chat with him, but this was in an interview. He was talking about the redrafting process. And if someone comes up to you and says, hey, this bit in your book, or this bit in your film, or this bit in your TV show, why didn't you do this instead? Don't listen to the solutions they give you. It's really interesting to listen to where there's a problem, where something hasn't worked for them, but they are not the best person to come up with a solution necessarily, you are. And so for me, the redrafting process was about that. It was trying not to take criticism personally.
Tough, right?
Really bloody tough.
Yeah.
Really tough. Especially when you're pouring emotions into this thing. But I think it's kind of key if you can, obviously, get back home, cry a bit, but then get rid of those emotions and actually try to analyze what they said. Do you agree with it? If you do, change it.
Yeah.
If you don't agree with the criticism, then that's useful too. Harden it and sharpen your idea. I'm making it sound really simple. Obviously, that's not the way it works.
Yeah.
But by a certain stage, I felt like I had hardened and sharpened the ideas enough by changing some of the things because I thought that the criticisms were fair, and not changing things because I felt they were unfair.
Right.
to be in a position to start sending it out.
Yeah.
Having been in that position before and failed, i.e. not picked up an agent and not picked up publishing deals, I approached it slightly differently this time. I tried to be strategic, and would highly recommend that anyone in a similar position have a strategy. I'm not sure it matters what your strategy is, but have a strategy.
Have one, yeah.
Because otherwise you're just sending stuff out blindly, and that is so corrosive. When your hope starts getting destroyed, it's really difficult to keep up that strength. Sure. So I had a list of a few agents who I would genuinely have loved to have had. And then I had a whole load of others who, all right. And I staggered those people who I sent it out to. Some of them, I didn't do it all at once, because I think that feedback process is really useful. Yeah. So some of them, you get your standard rejection letters. Some of them say something specific they don't like. Again, do I agree with it? Do I not? If I agree with that criticism, how can I change it? If I don't, how can I change it? And I'm, delighted that at a point during that process, one of the agents who I really, really wanted, who I thought would be fantastic, phoned me up and said, "I've read your book and I think it's fantastic." Obviously, that was on a voicemail, because it never works that the phone connects you during those calls. So for some reason, my phone didn't get that call coming. Right, so Juliet left a message for me, and it was a voicemail. I phoned her straight back, and she had left the office, of course. So you've got that lovely period of suspense when you're like, oh my God, is this it? Is this now?
So two questions there. How many, let's say just for this book, how many rejections had you had by that point?
I honestly can't remember.
Okay.
I'd had a couple of, I know I'd had some agents who I actually didn't really care about say no.
Yeah.
I'd had some really useful feedback from a couple of people on stuff that didn't work for them. And one really difficult moment came from an agent who was incredibly generous with her time and thought process. She came back and she said that she liked a lot about the book. My writing was very good. She liked a lot of the themes, but there's this one thing that happens in it that she didn't agree with and would mean that she couldn't represent the book.
Okay.
And it's not a moral thing. It's not any form of, depravity or anything like that. It's a bit of the plot that for her put it in a different bracket. I'm obviously talking around it without saying what it is, because it's still in there and you haven't got there yet.
Interesting.
And this was one of those things where she wouldn't represent it if that thing was still in the book.
Wow. But did she say, drop that and I'll represent you?
Yeah. And I went away and I thought about that and I couldn't do it because it's a core theme. It is a really important thing that happens in that book for me. And I think this is what we were talking about earlier on, about that passion and that belief. In that moment, I knew if I cut it out, the book wouldn't have been right for me. And so I had to say no.
Wow. I mean, that's actually giving me goosebumps there, because what you're saying, you didn't know at this point if you'd get any other deal, right?
No.
And this person who you respected enormously was saying to you, drop that and I'll represent you.
Yeah.
And you just stick to your guns.
Yeah.
Amazing.
It didn't feel as strong as sticking to my guns.
No, okay.
But yeah, there was a decision point that I made that I think is really interesting when it comes to success and failure. I do quite a bit of coaching as well as writing. I'm a communications coach. Doing, presentation skills, negotiating, creative strategic thinking, a whole load of lovely stuff, storytelling in business, and change management. And a lot of stuff that you look at in change management is active choice.
Right.
A lot of people feel pressured into doing things that they don't want to do, but there's often a choice you can make. And this was just one of those choices that I had to make. It wasn't the choice I wanted to make, but it was what I had to make.
Yeah.
And the benefit of that was I then found an agent who believed in me and my book and everything I was trying to do with it. And that moment, that theme, that bit was something that she loved.
Really?
And so then you're in a place which is total win, total success, happy.
But I mean, and I think I wrote this to you in the email when we were setting this up. Those small things that change the direction of your life. The fact that she loved that theme in the book. Yeah. By the way, will I recognise what that is when I read it? Maybe not.
I'll think about it. I'll try and give you a clue that's not going to give it away.
Yeah, no, you don't have to do that. But I'll ask you anyway when I've read it.
Sooner or later, you're going to start thinking, who's doing that? Who's taking people?
Okay.
And it's the payoff to that.
Okay. I mean, you've really got my mind going now. Okay.
And it's one of those things also, those moments, those bits of luck also, that I spent the time trying to do my research to think who would like to represent this book, who might like it. And, the agent that I have now was on my list from the start as someone who I hoped would be interested.
Right.
But that's luck. That's luck that I read a couple of books of authors that she represents, and that a few people started to say, have you thought about this person? I mean, life is luck, isn't it? It's luck and preparation and that mix of stuff.
But you're saying it's luck that you'd read those books, but I mean, come on, that's preparation as well.
Well, it's also tenacity.
Yeah.
It's also actually doing something you believe in and becoming steeped in it. So reading those books, thinking widely, talking to people, being interested. If you're interested in a world, you're going to get information, I think. Yeah. And if you're interested, that's also an energy which is outward looking. You're looking at other people, you're looking at other stuff, which means you can be enthusiastic. And I think enthusiasm... has to have a part in all of this, doesn't it?
I think it's one of the most important things. Yeah. People respond so well to enthusiasm.
Yeah, it can get hurt, it can get damaged, it can get, hope can be trodden on, and that takes a long time to recover from. But if you can grow it again and be genuine and keep on going, fingers crossed.
Yeah,
something good happens.
Yeah. So you get this voicemail. Yeah. I mean, set the scene. Where were you when you got the voicemail? How did that make you feel?
I was walking along Upper Street in Islington, having finished a day's coaching.
Okay.
So I was pretty tired from that because it's fairly all-consuming, that work. Got that voicemail and... I don't know. I mean, a whole load of physiological things I'm sure happened. Adrenaline going. My hands are tingling. A smile on my face. All of that stuff. Brain doesn't know what to think apart from just delight. But of course, she didn't say on the message she wanted to represent.
Right.
She said that she liked the book. Could I call her back?
Okay.
So with every hope, every silver lining has a cloud. So in that moment, you're thinking, but what's the but?
Of course. And at this stage in life where you've had a few knockbacks, you're preparing yourself. Maybe there is a but.
Yeah.
Right. You don't get too carried away. Whereas if you were 18 and that happened, you might have gone, oh my God, big time's coming.
Absolutely. And let's be honest, success, goals, that horizon expands. So my goal when I was writing The Feed was to write a book that I was proud of. Then you think, okay, I'm proud of this book. I'd like to send this to agents. And, I'm feeling hopeful in as much as you can because I feel it deserves some form of recognition. Then suddenly one of the agents you really hoped for is saying they like the book and your horizon expands again. Mm-hmm. So it's one of those moments where then I got on the phone and Juliet said she loved it. She wanted to talk about it. Could I go in? There were some aspects in the book that she wanted to talk about because she thought they needed some work.
Right.
And you're hoping. You're not there yet, but does that conversation go well? Do you feel a good connection with that person? Do you trust them? Because it's a vulnerable thing to reveal the inner mechanisms of something you're writing. And then the answer's yes and yes and yes again. And then suddenly you've got someone on team who's bloody brilliant. And then suddenly you feel, my horizons have expanded a bit more.
Right.
What does the potential success of this book now mean? And that's an interesting place to be in.
But so, I mean, that just must be such a high, getting all those yeses.
Yeah, it's incredible.
Yeah.
Because it's something that I had been hoping about. How old was I then? I don't know, mid-30s. I wrote my first novella, it's long enough to be a novel, when I was at school, when I was 14, 15. So this has been something that I've been aiming for, hoping for, working at for a very long time. So yeah, you've got to give yourself a pat on the back at that moment and then say, okay, now carry on working.
Just touching on that point, were there moments when you were writing throughout the years? So started at school.
Yeah.
And then I think you said you wrote a couple of other books, and you wrote plenty of other things that you didn't finish. Was there a point where, maybe you sort of answered this earlier actually, where you said, well, I'm just going to write for myself. I don't necessarily have to be published. It's just something I enjoy doing.
Yeah.
And were comfortable with the fact that you may never be a published author.
Yeah. Comfortable with it? I'm not sure about that.
So you still had the ambition that you wanted.
Of course, that ambition, that hope, that dream.
Yeah.
That desire, that passion. I think that a number of things changed in me over time. One was starting to become more okay with failure, or what I perceived to be failure. I grew up, I've had an unhealthy relationship with failure from a very early age.
How do you mean unhealthy?
At school, 9 out of 10 in a test, fail. Okay. And I beat myself up at that. I did well at my GCSEs, apart from one subject where I didn't get an A star. That was a fail. That ate me up for months and months and maybe longer. And that was a very brittle relationship. I think it's in education, isn't it? That you shouldn't fail. You've got to get things right. And if you don't get things right, then you don't get exam results. If you don't get exam results, you don't get into certain universities. If you don't get into certain universities, you don't get a certain career. You don't achieve. I don't know, maybe it's just me and I'm super sensitive to it, but I felt very strongly and I don't think it was necessarily my teachers or family or friends or any form of upbringing. I think it's something in my brain that actually I was terrified of being seen to have failed.
Really?
Fast forward over time, I mean, God, unless you're incredibly lucky, you're going to fail at something, aren't you?
It's just part of the process, right? And this is really what I'm trying to get to with this podcast. Not this particular episode, I just mean the whole thing. Anyone who's successful has almost certainly had more failures than they have had successes.
And I think that by definition, you've got to. Because at the end of your life, hopefully you're wise, hopefully you're experienced, hopefully you have knowledge that you didn't have when you were 12 or 8 or 16 or 25.
Yeah.
And I think everyone can fail in their own fields, and that's a way of learning. I mean, if anyone really wants to fail, go for acting.
Yeah, well, we're going to get onto that in a minute. But you know, the other thing I'd say is that success isn't linear, right? So people who are successful, they're not going to be successful forever, in the sense that everything they do is not going to be, you're not going to get more and more successful as you go on necessarily.
No.
So if you think about entrepreneurs, they may build one great business in their lifetime. And that frequently happens, that the next business they build is nowhere near as successful. And I'm sure it's the same with authors. Yeah. They may write one book which is phenomenally successful, and if that's not a franchise, recurring sort of character, then the next book may not be as successful.
Absolutely. I mean, failure is an intrinsic part of learning.
Yeah.
I'm looking at my daughter learning to walk at the moment. She needs to fall over in order to strengthen the muscles, in order to keep her upright.
Yeah.
And we don't build in capacity for failure, I don't think. I don't think we build in capacity for failure in education, or I don't think it's talked about much at all, the benefit of it. And if you look at a company like Google, they're actually starting to look at failure in a really interesting way. A couple of places around the world, I understand, they've started to incentivize crap ideas. because they've recognized you've got to scroll through 10,000 crap ideas to have the one good idea. And actually, all of that crap was kind of like the manure that one good idea grew out of.
Right.
So they have bonus schemes for crap ideas. I mean, isn't that fantastic?
Yeah.
Failure isn't something where a teacher is looking at you, wagging a finger and going, and you put on your sad face and you go, I know, I was bad. I didn't work hard enough. Failure is something where you go, hey, you fucked up. Great, brilliant. Yeah. Now let's put that information back into the system and let's learn from that. Let's grow from that.
Right.
And I kind of feel like I got to a place where I had failed enough times and been so worried about other people's opinions of me. And off the back of those failures, well, I guess, most people didn't judge me awfully. It wasn't like the ground had opened up beneath my feet and I dropped into the pit of hell. I was still alive. I was still living. I was still fighting for stuff. And I was like, okay, failure is not quite what I thought it was.
That's interesting. And, without me being too grand about this, that's part of what I'm trying to do with the podcast, is get people talking about failure.
It's healthy.
You've got to.
Please do.
Yeah.
Please, and everyone listening, like, can we do something? Let's agree. I'm signing you up to this. I pledge to do it if you do too. But could we admit a failure to someone every day?
Right.
Big or small, and then it doesn't become scary.
Yeah, and that's why I'm so grateful to you and all the other guests I've had on, who are willing to talk about when it hasn't gone so well.
Yeah.
And it's never terminal.
Yeah. Well, maybe sometimes.
Well, maybe, but
some situations.
Not the things I'm talking about. Yeah. But you've got to embrace it.
Having said that, and I'm not making light of anything that's terminal, the airline industry uses the data from black box recordings to improve their technology.
Yeah.
Obviously, that's a devastating failure, and deaths have happened. But that information, that data, is then an essential part of not allowing it to happen again.
Yeah. Have you read that book? Is it by Matthew Said? He's a sports journalist. He used to be a table tennis player for the British team. He uses that example of the airlines and how there's not a kind of a judgmental process when they look into accidents, which means that people are very sort of open and honest about how the accident occurred, and they fix things. Mm-hmm. And I think he then says that in medicine that the opposite happens because no one wants to admit liability. That's a restricting circumstance because no one's discussing why people are dying on the operating table because no one wants to take the blame for it.
Yeah. So it's that similar thing about taking criticism personally.
Right.
Or being liable.
Being liable. Blame. Yeah. So how quickly then did that go from having these meetings with her? When did you then find out that they wanted to make it into a massive TV show?
So there was a big redrafting process from that point where I redrafted the novel I don't know how many times. And then it got to a point where Juliet said, okay, good, this is good enough to go out. And things moved pretty quickly from that moment.
But what happens then? Does it then go... So she's an agent.
Yeah.
Does she then go and find a publisher who will publish it?
That's right.
Right.
So she represents books and their authors to publishers and has built a reputation of her own as having certain authors doing certain things and success around that. So that cachet counts for something as soon as a manuscript lands on an editor's desk. And the feed was picked up in, I think it was under 24 hours from going out on submission to people.
Wow.
My publisher came in with a preemptive offer to take it off the table from other people.
I mean, did you have any inkling that would happen? Did she say to you, look, it's probably going to happen? Or did she say, don't get your hopes up too high, let's be slow and steady? Or
she was really good at managing my expectations.
Right.
And I think there were things that she was aiming for that she wasn't telling me about. which I think is a very, very wise way to go about things. Personally, I mean, I'm a pessimist with high hopes.
Right.
So I've got really high hopes about what's going to happen with something,
Yeah.
but deep down I think it's going to fail.
Yeah.
So that's a really difficult thing to manage, and I think she managed me incredibly well. And then it was lovely. I mean, it was an amazing process because the book went out and then suddenly you're watching your email, you're watching your phone. And she had said to me, expect nothing for a couple of weeks. Just don't think about it. But then the following day, in fact, that night, she forwarded me a couple of emails from some book scouts and a couple of agents who had read it already, who, were saying lovely things. And one of them saying their mind had just been blown. I'm like,
Really?
Yeah, great. I think that's a good thing.
Yeah. I mean, that must just feel so amazing when you get that email.
It's punch the air joy, because this thing that you've believed in, this thing that you've poured yourself into, that thing that you did because you wanted to write a book for yourself, it has connected with someone else. And that's when you even if it connects with no one else, it's connected with someone who likes it, and that's fantastic. And then it moved very quickly the following day, and obviously when Juliet phoned me to say that Headline, my publishers, had made an offer, I was off network, so she left a voicemail for me. And then I tried to phone her back and she wasn't in the office, so, we had the obligatory phone tag on that. And then the following week, I think it was, we had an auction in the States because a few publishers there were interested in it as well. And then the TV stuff started happening after that.
What's the sort of time frame? Weeks, months?
So this, I can't remember precisely. I was having meetings with people, and this is a very abnormal thing that happened. I think normally, you start to get those meetings, maybe before publication, but definitely after publication if things have gone well.
Yeah.
So there were a few offers from TV companies and film companies that had come in, and suddenly you're in this incredible position.
Yeah.
And it was one of those really rare moments in my life where I actually was in a position of a bit of power, in that I got to make a decision.
Really?
As an actor, you have nothing of that. The choice you get as an actor is to say no if you get offered a role.
Yeah.
What actor is going to say no? I mean, very few. And you're very rarely offered roles. So actually being in the position where I got to talk to people about where they saw this project going was amazing. And for me, the most important thing was having a sense that it was going to happen.
Yeah. And so by this stage, are we still in 2016?
We are probably still in 2016.
Okay.
Then meetings with film production companies, meeting with TV production companies, and this decision of who is the person that I can entrust this to, because I want it to work.
Yeah.
And it's not necessarily about the fidelity to the book. Obviously, you want it to be faithful, but actually you're looking at someone who's going to translate it into something that works. And because I've got a film background, I'd always thought of it as a film.
Ah, okay.
And that was a very strange leap to undergo. It was a very strange mental process to go through because I'd written it seeing the film. I'd even written it thinking about how it would be structured as a film script.
Right.
Because that was my background.
Okay.
And then suddenly you've got people who are really talking in exciting ways about a TV show. And then I was looking back at the book and I'm thinking, do you know what? Actually, there is a lot of plot. Not just plot. As I hope you'll see, the characters go a long way. And I'm not just talking physically. They do. There are a lot of footsteps taken in the book. But emotionally, they go to a lot of different places. And I thought, actually, do you know what? This is 2 hours for a film, for an audience to watch people doing those emotional journeys. I'm not sure it works.
Right.
But if you've got a series, 10 episodes, 10 hours, that's interesting. Actually, as it turns out, what's being shot at the moment, the first series of The Feed, is going up to that point you mentioned earlier on, page 15, when the feed goes down. So 10 hours for the first 15 pages of the book. Okay. And the rest will be done over future series, fingers crossed.
Yeah.
So that was a really interesting process when at the end there was a leap of faith whereby I said, okay, I think it's you guys, let's do it. And, as reality shows right now, it's being filmed. So
amazing.
It looks like that was the right decision.
I mean, that feeling, in your wildest dreams, did you ever consider that was going to happen?
No, I didn't think that a big budget TV show of the book would happen. I think that I did have slightly misplaced confidence in a film of the book happening.
Okay.
Purely because that was the world I'd come from.
Right.
I think in my head, I had in my back pocket, if no one else makes the film version of this, I will. And you were talking earlier on about the post-apocalyptic world in the feed and how for you it was reminiscent of The Walking Dead. And for me, I really drew on things like 28 Days Later and 28 Weeks Later, which I love. But with my independent film producer's hat on, that's just cheap to put on screen.
Right.
So quite a lot of the book is cheap in order to film,
right,
or in my version of it, not in the TV show's version of it. In my version it is, you've got stuff at the beginning where there's the feed, that's really VFX heavy, and you've got some exciting stuff at the end coming up that would cost a lot. But from my point of view as a low budget independent film producer, I was looking at it thinking, how could I turn it into something? And I think that gave me a really, really misdirected, unfounded sense of confidence that someone would make a film of the book at some point.
Okay.
Which is a ludicrous thing to believe in, because that is so unlikely.
Yeah, but I mean, it's totally understandable as well, because like you said, and we'll get into this in a minute, your background is making those kind of films. Right?
Yeah, it might be understandable, but it's certainly setting up for some catastrophic depression if it didn't work.
Okay.
I'm just incredibly lucky that it did. Yeah. And now it looks like I kind of planned it, which I totally didn't.
Yeah.
No.
I mean, so, okay, that's just... That blows my mind, and it's incredible, like the whole story and your perseverance as well to kind of go, look, I'm gonna keep writing because it's something I love doing, and I'm gonna keep putting it out there, and hopefully something will come from it.
Yeah, I think there's a huge strength in stupidity. If you look at the odds-on stuff, I mean, so many ventures would not happen correctly because you're being rational. But that strength in stupidity when you go, I believe in it, I'm passionate about it, I know it's difficult, I don't quite know how difficult it's going to be, and God, it turns out to be more difficult. But that strength in stupidity is great as long as it doesn't start damaging you.
Yeah.
And as soon as you reach that point where hope is being eroded in a corrosive way that's affecting your sense of self-esteem and your positivity and your relationships and your friendships and your quality of life, I think that's when you need to reassess things and pull a bit of a ripcord.
Had that happen to you? How close were you to that?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I'd very much been in that. I think it depends how you define failure and success, as we've talked about. But I'd certainly got to my rock bottom place.
Really?
Absolutely. In terms of a career that just was not working, acting.
Yeah, so let's talk about that a little bit. You were at Cambridge and then you went to RADA.
Yeah, that's right.
Right.
Good CV points.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So by any measure, you would think, oh, well, this guy's got a pretty good shot at being a successful actor.
Yeah, you've got to hope. You've got your fingers crossed, haven't you?
Right. And then
there are however many thousand people applying for all these drama schools, and you get in, and on day one, you've got 20 other people who are there with you, and you're all looking at each other going, we made it. You must be good. Oh, well, if you're good, I must be good. Oh, brilliant.
And you must be good. But that doesn't mean you're going to be a successful actor, right? There's so many things that have to fall into place to make that happen.
Yeah, loads of things, loads of externalities, loads of things you can't predict.
Yeah.
Part of which is your own talent. Like, you might be good, or you might have raw talent, but actually, how does it develop?
Right.
And then how do you deal under, how do you cope under pressure of auditions? Or how do you cope under the pressure of the reality of what the vast majority of actors' lives are, which is I'm extrapolating from my own experience, having spoken with a bunch of other people, friends, actors. My experience doesn't seem to be uncommon. But you can get into this cycle of hope and depression, and going in for auditions that you know you're good at, you know you can nail it, you need that chance. And if that chance pays off, you're suddenly in a different world, a different reality, but that reality never happens. And you take that back into your next audition.
Was it after RADA you then got a pretty decent job?
Oh, yeah. Yep. Got a great job before I left.
Before you left?
Yeah, it was again, incredible luck. that there was a film about the artist El Greco, a big budget international co-production about the artist El Greco, and they were looking for, that was it, they were looking for an up-and-coming actor who was unknown, because they didn't want the actor to overshadow the character of the artist himself. The director was Greek, and it was at the time where Ben Whishaw had big success in Hamlet, and his great career was just launching. And Yanis, the director, wanted someone like Ben Whishaw before he'd become Ben Whishaw. Okay. So what do you do? Well, what drama school did Ben go to? He went to RADA. Okay, let's get in touch with RADA. Are there any graduates who are coming out at the moment who are good, who could be good for this role? And I think they were sending out emails left, right and centre and looking for people in America and the UK. But what was really lucky was that the play that I was doing at the time was a Russian play. It was a Chekhov play, Platonov, and I was playing the lead, which is just luck, isn't it? I mean, there were other people who could have played it, and it happened that was my turn to play the lead role in one of our end-of-year shows.
Oh, is that what happened? They just circulate it?
Yeah.
Because I was going to say, well, it must have been because you were good. So
well, hopefully, but there's some logic in place that everyone has to, should be having their moment in the spotlight.
Sure.
And that was mine. And for that part, I had grown my hair long, so it was down to my shoulders, and I had a big Russian beard. And it just so happens that a big Russian beard also looks like a big Greek beard. And, a whole load of things came together in that. And, I hope that I did a good audition. I must have done a good enough audition as well. So I got that role. So fresh out of RADA, and I had the lead role in a multi-million-pound budget international co-production about El Greco. And I'm playing him, and then it premieres at the Toronto Festival. And that's one of those moments where you go, cool, I've made it.
Yeah.
All right, let's sit back. Okay, the calls are going to come in now.
Yeah. How old were you?
Early 20s, and you're thinking, this is it. And then the calls don't come for whatever reason. And that takes a while because you're living in a little dreamscape. You're living in an alternative reality where you go, cool, this is where I am and this is the way things are going. But reality is happening around you while you're dreaming and hoping. And then it takes a number of months or years for your sense of reality to catch up with what's real. And I think in that time there's been a really interesting dislocation in where your dreams were heading and what is actually happening. And that's the bit that I think can be unhealthy and dangerous, especially how you process with it. Remember, I was the guy who doesn't do failure or has a bad relationship with failure from school, 9 out of 10 in a test, yikes, have some existential crisis. So I'm not talking to anyone about my failing acting career. I'm not talking to anyone about the effect that has on my personal life and how I feel about myself, or the effect it has on relationships, because your self-esteem is bad. Yeah. So that stuff that you're pressure cooking. And I don't know, in terms of different sorts of success, I hope that I have come out of that process a healthier human being who can process with things going wrong a little bit better.
And how long did that period last then? When did you were you getting auditions? Was there some point where you said, look, acting's just not going to work? How did that play out?
Yeah, it lasted longer than it should have done. And the fallout, the recovery period of it, I guess, lasted longer again. Because that stuff has a big effect on you, doesn't it?
For sure.
And not just in terms of, I've got a career path that I'm aiming for, now I need to change. But also in terms of the physiological effect it has on you.
Yeah. Yeah, because presumably you'd kind of, I don't know from what age, but to that point you were going, well, I'm going to be an actor.
Yeah, that's what I do.
Yeah.
That's what I love. And I know it's going to be tough. Every actor knows it's going to be tough. That's part of what you wear. And it's a game of chicken. And I'm carrying on into this career. And as long as I can keep going for long enough, other people will fall by the wayside, and then I'll get that role.
Yeah.
But actually, what if I should be one of those people who fall by the wayside?
Yeah.
And you get into your later 20s, early 30s and you're like, this isn't actually how I want to live. This isn't healthy. It's not enjoyable. I'm not enjoying myself. So it would be lovely to be doing something I would enjoy, but I'm not. So therefore I have to do something different.
Yeah. And particularly if you've got that relationship with failure that you spoke about, you don't want to admit that this hasn't worked out.
You don't admit it to your friends. You don't admit it to your family. You are scared almost even of admitting it to yourself, or I was. I'd kind of take a sneaky peek at it out of the corner of my eye and then go, la, 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 okay, I'm going to carry on. I'm getting ready for the next audition. I'm going to carry on writing this book, which is something I did in my spare time while I wasn't acting.
Yeah, that coming to terms with it yourself, I would imagine, is the most difficult thing.
Yeah, but then out of that stuff, other stuff grew, and it sort of happened by accident. And I'm really glad it did. I'm not quite sure how or why, but I started doing two other things. One was making films, producing them. In your spare time, actors have a lot of spare time. A big frustration is, what can I do with my energy? Well, putting it into making something is a great idea, and producing films, getting ideas going, raising finance was something I could do actively. And something else was this coaching that I mentioned before, which is fueled by a lot of the same instincts that I have as an actor. You're trying to understand the world from other people's view, and then you're trying to explain things in a way that they understand to help them, to better their lives, and whether it's presenting or whatever it is. So that was something I started doing, which I loved and had an instinct for. And I wouldn't have done that if the acting hadn't been going well. If it had been going well.
Okay, and so whilst you were doing that coaching, you were still writing, presumably, were you?
Yeah, actually when I had the book deal finally in place, one of my friends from RADA said, well, it's not a surprise that you're now a writer, because you were always writing, weren't you? You wrote a book at school, you wrote a book at university, you wrote a book in between, you wrote a book at RADA. And it was kind of weird, because obviously that was true. And of course I knew I'd been doing that because it had taken quite a lot of time and work to write those books. But in that moment, like, the penny dropped and I realized, oh God, I had been. Maybe this isn't a surprise that I've had a book published, because actually the way I try to understand the world, the way I process my experiences, by writing things down, and not necessarily a diary, but actually creating a fictional world where you're examining stuff that you're confused by. And that was a real moment of clarity for me, where maybe what had been obvious to my friend became obvious to me, and I thought, oh yeah, this is something that I do.
Do you look back on it now and go, well, I was always meant to be a writer?
No. But there was we've been talking about those moments in life where you do one thing, or these little things that change your life. And there was a moment when I left school, when I was going to university, and I had a place at Cambridge to study English, and I had a place at UEA, University of East Anglia, to study English and creative writing.
So you really wanted to be in that area of the country?
Yeah, definitely, absolutely. And the geography of it aside, it was very much the decision was so difficult. And I think in a way my heart was saying, go to UEA, do the writing.
Really? Has that got a really good reputation for creative writing?
It's got a hugely good reputation for creative writing, the best in the country.
Right.
And it's very difficult to get on to. And I had a really low offer, so I kind of felt like the guy who'd interviewed me liked me as well. And my heart was saying, go there. And my head was saying, you can't not go to Cambridge if you've been offered a place.
Right.
You can't not do that. And that was what I did. I went there and I don't regret it for a second. Met fantastic people, acted in loads of plays, had a wonderful time. But there had always been a little bit of me thinking, well, what would have happened if? And it got to the stage when, after acting, I was coaching, and I thought, actually, I really want to take writing seriously. I really want to just see if that works now. And what I had been doing as a pastime, as something that I enjoyed doing and I had hopes for, there was a moment when I thought, okay, no, now I'm going to take this seriously for a period of time and see if it works. And that was almost like what would have happened if I had gone down that other route.
Yeah. And you just can't second guess this stuff though, can you? I mean, who knows where your life would have taken you had you have made a different decision at that point.
But I think that's kind of like, I was talking earlier on about the redrafting of the novel and how the Feed, for example, has gone through at least 25 drafts. And I've got my inner magnet for that. I know roughly where the story's heading or the themes I want to touch on. I know what's important. I know its values. And then you get other people's inputs that shape those values or shape the novel. And I do love a good analogy, but I think life is kind of similar. We've got an idea of what's important to us. We've got an aim that we're trying to achieve. And the course of life is a series of redraftings where stuff happens to you, it works or it doesn't. Someone says something to you that takes you by surprise, that changes the course of your life. 10 years later, you circle back around and you pick something up that you had been doing that you then left that's now interesting. It's a constant process of redrafting. There's no finishing line. Well, obviously there is, but may that be a long way away. Yeah. And it's about finding out who you are and hopefully being truer to that person and also allowing it to change.
Yeah, beautifully said. And that is, in a sense, exactly what you say. The redrafting is learning from your failures.
And there's strength from that. That means that you're getting strength from your failures, which I think has to be healthy.
Sure.
If all you're getting is something which is eroding your sense of self, then those failures are not helping. You're either failing in the wrong way or in the wrong area or processing it in the wrong way. But if you can fail and it builds strength, then...
But do you think that might also be to do with the person?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because some people are just not able to process failure as easily isn't the right word. But, for instance, I've got a pretty healthy attitude to failure in the sense that I don't necessarily view it as a failure. But, the businesses I've started have not turned into massive successes.
Yeah.
But I just carry on going because I've got this very firm belief that something will work. And if you keep learning from what's gone wrong and adapting, then at some point you're going to find that you hit on something that works.
Yeah, and I think the more you fail, the better you are at failing. There's a big difference between what you think is going to happen when you fail and what actually happens. Well, that's my experience anyway.
Yeah.
I
it's
remember,
almost never as bad as you think it's going to be.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I remember this time while I was at RADA, and we have these things called, song and verse and speech and verse. As you can imagine, you're doing a song and a poem and a speech and a poem in front of the whole school and all of the teachers. And they are sitting in the auditorium watching you, and they're making notes on what's wrong, on how you can improve. Mm-hmm. That's psychologically pretty terrifying. And, I got halfway through a song one time and the words went. That's kind of like my worst nightmare, or it was at the time, in terms of failing on stage for me was forgetting your lines.
Sure.
Obviously you can probably fail in a whole load of different ways, but for me that's what it was at that moment. And it happened in front of everyone. And I don't know what I thought was going to happen. Like the world would end somehow? Utter shame? I don't know. All that actually happened was the head of the school said, "Oh, do you want to start again?" What I should have done in that moment was say yes, regroup, have a think, remember the words, do it again, do it well. What I did was I said yes and started immediately and got to the same point, still didn't know what the words were, and just kind of made it up. And it was pretty icky, but the world didn't end. No. I still went to class the next day. I still learnt more. It wasn't what I thought it was going to be. And I think that if you can fail, there's Andrew Stanton, isn't it, who runs Pixar. He said something like, fail as quickly as possible.
Well, I know that Facebook have on the they have it written all around their offices, I think, where they say fail fast or something like that.
And that's a different mindset. If you're actively trying to fail or actively risking failing, I'm risking failure, so therefore failure is a possibility, as opposed to coming into it going, I will not fail. I won't fail. I won't fail. I'm not going to fail. No one is ever going to see me fail. You've set yourself up for a fall.
Yeah, and actually I have a real problem with that kind of thinking, which you see a lot in business, where you hear people advising entrepreneurs, startup guys, don't even consider the possibility that you're going to fail. If you do that, you're finished. And I was going, that's just horse shit. You really are setting yourself up for failure if you do that. Yeah. Just the very basic thing that you're not preparing for the things that might make you fail.
You've got to play to win. You've got to play to win. But I also think that you can play or you can incorporate failure. You can incorporate getting it wrong into a process. So Google with the bonus scheme for things going wrong. Yeah. Or what I was trying to do with my strategy of staggering sending the book out to agents, because I knew it wasn't good enough. I knew it wasn't quite right. And that, to my mind, is incorporating failure, in inverted commas, as part of that process.
It's exactly what we were doing when we were approaching investors with our startup. Yeah. You kind of, in exactly the same way, you don't approach like the top guys first. No. You do the ones you're not so keen on, or, you're not so enthusiastic about. And you wait for the feedback from that, and then you build on them. And it's a process.
Exactly. Sure. With coaching, someone's just learned a new behavioral technique. For God's sake, if you ever go to a coaching session or learn anything new, please don't try it for the first time in front of the exec board. Don't try it in a presentation that really bloody matters, because it'll go wrong. Try it out on your friends, try it out on your family, try it out at the pub when you're telling a story. First, so that muscle's strong and you can get it wrong in a safe place. Then you've got that new skill, you've got that new technique. That's incorporating failure into a process.
I think. Are you a sports fan? Do you watch any football?
Yeah, tennis.
Tennis.
Yeah.
Okay.
One of my failings in life is foot-eye coordination, and I think that had a knock-on effect on my enjoyment of the sport. Whereas I'm okay at hitting a ball, so I get behind Wimbledon.
Jurgen Klopp, who's the Liverpool manager, he did a press conference last season during the Champions League where he says, and I just love it, it's really simple, he just says, if you really want to win, sometimes you've got to be willing to lose. And I mean, it's so simple, but I just love that. And that is just kind of the mentality with which I think you do have to approach things.
I think if you're not willing to lose, you're probably not taking risks in the right way.
Exactly.
And to do something out of the ordinary, you've probably got to take a risk, which is bit out of the ordinary too.
For sure. And that doesn't mean being reckless.
No, certainly not, because that's dangerous and unhealthy, and you can't come back from that sometimes. But if you're doing something which is in the parameters of what you can tolerate, and that's where it got to with acting. I could no longer tolerate it. It was having too much of a profound effect on my life and my sense of self. And so you've got to stop it, and it hurts and it's gutting, and it's just the way things are.
Yeah. So how long did that process take? I mean, how long did it take you to sort of come back to a place where the self-esteem was at a decent level?
I honestly couldn't tell you. It's one of those slow-moving processes where things are moving tectonically, and your brain and your personality is doing a lot of rejuvenating in the subconscious. But it took a long time. Months, years, a long time.
Yeah, okay. I suspect years. I mean, I don't know you, but I'm just thinking that kind of, Yeah.
And it wires your brain in a different way. We were talking about, taxi drivers and their hippocampi, I don't know, plural hippocampus. But my experience of acting definitely fed into my response to what I was expecting to happen with the book. Right. And this idea that I think is true, that I am a pessimist with high hopes. That pessimism, I think, is something which is natural, it is instinctive, but it then got pretty ground into me as well.
How long ago was that you gave up on the acting? Gave up is not the right way of saying it.
There was a slow deterioration and then a coming to an end that happened between, I don't know, kind of 2009 to 2012-ish.
Okay.
That sort of time frame.
Yeah. And at your lowest point, did you ever imagine... I mean, you can't obviously have envisaged this, but looking back now, do you go, wow, I was pretty low then, and now I'm in a good place?
I could never have hoped for this then. But what was really nice about that period of time was a redefinition of success. And I got to the place coming out of that, and I said it was kind of rock bottom for me, and it was. It's not a massive sob story, but I got to a place where I realised one day that I actually liked myself again. Mm. And the deterioration of self-esteem for me and confidence and the lack of success at something you poured everything into had got me to a place where I didn't like myself.
Right.
Because I wasn't proud of myself and I felt like I was apologising. And I was also starting to be someone different, someone who I wasn't, in order to try to please other people.
Okay, how do you mean?
Acting's not working. What am I going to do? Am I going to retrain to do this or that or the other? And none of those things felt right to me, but I felt obliged to think about them.
I get it, okay.
And it was because it was being fueled by a sense of me not being good enough.
Yeah.
Not having achieved, not having had success, which therefore meant I was a failure, which meant I wasn't good enough, which meant I didn't like myself. And it got to a point where I thought long and hard about things and took a step back from that. And I realized that it wasn't that I didn't like life, I just didn't like my life.
Right.
And so then it was just a question of working out, well, what would be the life that you would like?
Yeah.
And
that sounds incredibly simple the way you say it now, but I bet at that point you're stuck there and you're going, oh my God, I feel like a loser.
Yeah, absolutely.
Waking up at 3 a.m, going, what am I doing? What have I done? And just all those feelings we all know.
Being philosophical is a really nice side effect of having really fucked something up. But the nice thing was, it was a moment when I looked at myself and I thought, this is who I am. This is what I enjoy. I've got to a stage in my life where I feel old enough. I've got to a stage in my life where I am now, making enough money from coaching to survive, to have an okay life. I could take myself off to Devon or Cornwall, come back into London a couple of times a week, do some coaching, and otherwise I could just write. And I've got a couple of good friends, and that's enough in life, isn't it? Isn't it? That feels like enough in life to me.
Yeah.
And there was something in that where I thought, I can survive. I'm not going to be an Oscar-winning actor. I'm not going to be doing all of these other things that I thought were on track in my life. But what I do have is pretty damn good. And I think something relaxed in me at that point. And from that, all of this other stuff has built. From being a bit more relaxed, I think.
Incredible. I don't know what the lesson to take from that is. I feel like it's be more relaxed. Maybe it's like a personal thing though. You've got to figure that out for yourself, and letting go of the expectations and the pressure that you put yourself under is the big thing, right?
I think that's a big thing. I think that everyone's lives are their own. And you've got to take your own lessons from it. Learn stuff from it. For God's sake, learn stuff from it. But have the confidence to trust what you are learning. Yeah. And you can listen to other people who are wise and who've done stuff before and learn from that, which is fantastic. But actually, the only lessons that really matter are the ones that you've experienced and put into process. And maybe it's something to do with sensitivity as well. Maybe it's something to do with having a thin skin that can also be thickened when you need it. I mean, just looking at writing, you need to have a thin skin. You need to be sensitive to stuff that's going on outside. You need to be sensitive to the emotions that you're feeling inside. But you need to have a thick skin too. And you need to be a little bit structured in when you're unleashing the thick skin and when you're allowing the thin skin to be down. And I think if you can do that, then you can start to even take some Amazon reviews. Hey, there are some really good Amazon reviews. There's a hell of a lot of 5-star ones there.
Yeah.
But you notice that, 2% of people have given it a 1-star review. What the hell?
Wow.
Why?
Yeah.
Oh, because it's not a AA battery. Well, of course it's not a AA battery.
Yeah, no, you got to steer clear of that, I think.
You got to steer clear of that. And I think that comes with life as well.
Yeah.
Look at what you want to look at. Don't look at the rest. Keep your eyes focused and your energy focused on what you want to achieve.
So what's next then? So the TV show comes out in 2019, is that right?
Yeah, there's not a release date set yet, but I imagine it'll be out kind of September, October 2019.
Oh, okay. So still about a year away.
Still about a year away. We're shooting up until December, maybe a little bit after, and then there's a big post-production period.
Right, and they're shooting in London, yes? Or in the UK?
In the UK.
In the UK,
yeah.
Okay.
Some bits in London.
Okay.
We closed a London landmark for the night the other week, which I can't reveal where it was.
Interesting.
But that was one of those moments where you go, I've got somewhere, I've achieved something, I'm disrupting the traffic flow in London.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
That's cool.
But you also did that on one of your other films that you worked on.
Did that on a film as well. I've had a year of disrupting London traffic, which is brilliant. Yeah.
So, and you go along to set how often then?
Not as often as I've wanted to, just because things have been quite busy. But I'm going to be going in a little bit more often now. And I've been dropping in, and been to the read-throughs. And
yeah. And do you have how much impact do you have? Do you say, well, I imagined it like that? Do they ask you what's?
Contractually, they have no need to ask me anything, and they certainly don't need to listen to what I say. Yeah. Actually, what's been happening has been a lovely process of conversation about, first of all, how many series were going to come from the book. For a while it was 1, for a while it was 5, then it turned into 3. I think we're probably around 3 at the moment. Wow. Channing, who is the showrunner on the feed, Channing Powell, she's also worked on the last numbers of series of The Walking Dead. She really knows what she's doing. Yep. It's incredible to have her on board, and she's been so wonderful at adapting the book. I mean, it's different in places from the book. It has to be, but it's faithful to the book. Yeah. Most of the differences either slip between the pages or they're true to those values and themes that resonate in the book. So that's been a fascinating process to watch and be involved in, and to have the scripts through and to make comments, and for the most part have those comments responded to really well. There are a couple of things where I've said, oh, what about this? And something else has happened, which is fine. Nothing that's been important so far.
So that's happening. Are you writing anything new? Can you tell us anything about that? Yeah,
so I'm writing another book at the moment, which has a working title, Other Kinds of Furies.
Ooh.
That has nothing to do with the feed. That is a totally different book set in a totally different world and time. And should the TV series and the book do well, I know what happens in the next 2 feed books. Actually, that came a bit from this strength in stupidity that we were talking about earlier on. That was during one of the discussions with Studio Lambert, who's now producing the TV series. And it was one of the early meetings, and Sue Hogg, the brilliant producer of the show, she said to me, of course, they wanted it to be a long-standing returning TV series. So could I tell them what happened in the books 2 and 3? And in my head, Sue, I hope, will never listen to this podcast. Sue said, yeah, what happens in books 2 and 3? And in my head, I'm thinking, oh, golly, it was a standalone book, and it's taken me 5 years to write. Obviously, what comes out of my mouth is, yeah, books 2 and 3 are really cool. I mean, what shall I do? Shall I send you a 1-pager on an outline of them next week? She said yes. I walk away from that meeting going, oh, Christ. But this strength in stupidity actually I think you can get yourself to a certain place on projects where if you then put yourself in difficulty, you have to make something work. And I love loose ends in creations anyway, in fictions. Those Russians in that episode of The Sopranos, I don't know if you've seen that one.
Yeah, brilliant.
Pine Barrens.
Yeah.
Those Russians are still out there.
Yeah.
And for me, imaginatively, that does amazing things with the audience because it means they have ownership of that world. And there were already some loose ends in the feed that I knew I wanted in there, and I went back to them over that weekend and I just loosened them a bit more and thought about where they were actually heading, because at that moment they were just loose ends, and I thought, what am I actually setting up here? And over the course of 3 days I knew how the second book was going to begin, I knew how it was going to end. Big surprise at the beginning, big surprise at the end, and I knew a pivotal moment in book 3, probably the midpoint of that book. Wow. So that was one of those lovely moments of the strength and stupidity that actually created something new that then got me very excited about. So I know what happens in those 2 books now.
But presumably now it's a different kind of feeling that you have. It's pressure now that what you do next has got to live up to...
Jesus Christ, I haven't thought of it like that. Thanks so much.
Great. Come on, of course you had.
It's a different area. And one that I've not written from before. I've not written from the place of being a published author before. Yeah. I've not written from the place of being an author whose first book is being turned into a TV show before. Yeah. And I'm sure there are some existential crises on the way. Yeah. There's also a little bit of freedom. So it means that the ideas for book 2 and 3, I've given them to Channing. She knows the rough ideas of what I'm thinking about. Whether she chooses to use them for the TV show or not, totally up to her. There's no obligation. And the TV show might completely diverge, which actually gives me a hell of a lot of freedom in the books. In terms of this new book I'm writing, Other Kinds of Furies, there are themes that are similar, but it's quite a different book. Okay. But there are themes that I think will really resonate with people who've read the feed, things about technology, things about family, things about... human interaction and what humans do to each other. Again, I'm trying to talk around things rather than talking about it because you're not there in the feed.
No, yeah, fine. Don't give anything away then.
But I don't know, you can't... I'm trying to get back into that headspace of writing for myself. I'm writing Other Kinds of Furies for myself, and I really hope that when people read it, that something will touch their experiences, their worries, their anxieties, their fears, and their excitements and their passions too. And I hope that human being a bit vulnerable turns into a strength when other humans go, oh, that's speaking to my vulnerabilities too. Hopefully there's a strength in that vulnerability.
I think we'll wrap it up there. That's been really, really interesting, and I think a lot of valuable insights that have come out from that. In terms of the book, it's available pretty much everywhere, right?
In terms of the book, yes. You can go into bookshops, you can go on Amazon, you can Kindle, you can audiobook it.
And I think you said
or if
earlier,
you see me in the street,
it.
Jump me and I'll find a copy for you.
Excellent.
Please read it.
Sign it.
I hope you enjoy it. I'd love to sign it.
Yeah. Okay. So, and if people just go to Amazon and type in the feed,
it
comes
feed
up straight away.
By Nick Clark Windo.
Beautiful.
No E on the end of Clark, no W on the end of window. I mean, it's a crazy name to have if you want to be easily, findable.
Is it though? That's good, isn't it? To have a kind of slightly
but
different
Clark,
name.
Windo, they're both part of the surname. There's no hyphen. Where the hell do you end up on the bookshelves? I mean...
Okay, I hadn't considered that. I will say, though, I went on Amazon and just put the feed in. It came up straight away.
Fab. There you go. Do that.
So you're obviously... doing well in terms of the algorithm. You're right at the top of the list. So you can thank tech for that.
Thank you, tech. I do love you.
Yeah.
And I hope you do enjoy it if you read it.
Any kind of social media presence? I mean, that's a bit weird. That's a bit meta asking you that with the topic of the book, but is there a Twitter or something that people can follow you on?
Yes, I'm on Twitter. So search for Nick Clark Windo. I think my handle is Nick HD Clark.
Okay, excellent. I'll find it and I'll put it underneath. Yeah. Unless you don't want people following.
No, please follow away.
Yeah, excellent. Well, thank you so much for that, Nick. It's been a real pleasure, and I look forward to finishing the book and seeing the TV show next year. Thank you.
Been an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much for having me.